The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. As 2024 comes to a close, we're taking a look at the news scene here in Nanaimo. At the start of the year, Mick Sweetman was reporting for CHLY. He now finds himself as the Nanaimo reporter for The Discourse. I welcomed Mick back to the studio to have him help dissect some of the stories that stood out from the last 12 months. I am joined by CHLY alumni and current Discourse reporter Mick Sweetman. Mick, welcome back to the CHLY studio.
Great, happy to be here.
And I'm very happy that you are here. Maybe could you introduce yourself to folks and maybe a bit about the work you do now with The Discourse?
Yeah, so my name is Mick Sweetman. I am a reporter for The Discourse here in Nanaimo. And what we are, we're an independent online news outlet focused on in-depth, solutions-oriented journalism. We serve communities that have lost local newspapers. Primarily, we started out in the Cowichan Valley in 2018, and then we launched in Nanaimo in 2020 with the founding reporter Julie Chadwick, who is definitely a friend of the station here. And basically, people were just asking for a new type of local journalism in the city that kind of is a bit different than the existing outlets here, which is less of a daily news kind of approach, where we kind of look at things in a little more depth and try to reflect kind of some of the community concerns. Often these stories that we do are kind of like pitched to us in a way from our readers. They're like, we ask our readers, like, what are the issues that, you think are important in the community? What do you think we should look into? And like try to really follow up on that and like find answers like to these questions. So yeah, we're also a community funded organization. We really rely on our supporters to make donations so we can continue to work and produce the journalism here in Nanaimo. We're actually doing a funding drive right now. Looking forward to sign up 100 supporters, I think, by the end of this week. And, definitely if people are interested in that, you can go to our website, which is thediscourse.ca, and there's a supporter or support us kind of button you can click on, and they'll allow you to become a monthly supporter of the thing. You can also sign up for our email newsletters, which we put out twice a week. We do one arts and culture newsletter, which is, primarily but not limited to listings of what's music, like arts, events, meetings that are happening around the city every week. And we also do our newsletter, which is, the News in the Nanaimo newsletter. And that comes out on Thursdays. And that will give you kind of like, usually like an original news story for me, as well as some roundup of other local news and a community photo or two.
I'm hoping we can recap a little bit of what's gone on in this year in Nanaimo in news. Maybe before we get to that specifically, you talked about at the Discourse trying to do something other than sort of the daily news cycle that might already exist. Could you give me some examples of some of the things you've covered and how that looks different than that daily news cycle? Yeah.
Well, I think like one thing that really kind of stands out to me is like our arts coverage. I think is something that is different from a lot of the outlets here. And one interview really stands out to me. It's one of the first stories I actually did for The Discourse. I interviewed musician and multidisciplinary artist MJ McGregor. I just wanted to know what their story was. I knew them. I've seen them perform as their project called Truth a number of times, but I never really kind of got a chance to sit down and talk with them about who they were and kind of where they came from. And it was an amazing conversation. I learned like a ton of things about them, and they were like I won't read the story, but I do encourage readers to go and read that Q&A on thediscourse.ca. And, they talk about kind of being raised in kind of like a, like secretive, like insular, like Christian religion and like off the, just outside of the town of Ladysmith, and kind of like with the impact that had on them, and kind of like how they kind of like broke from that. And, kind of are finding a new place and a new way to live here in Nanaimo. And I thought it was just like such a fascinating interview that, like really kind of like really stood out to me, like both as a piece of journalism as also as like a really like exceptional experience that somebody would like tell me, such an intimate and kind of like personal story. And like, it was just like a really special moment for me.
How has your view of the Nanaimo art scene changed as a result of conversations like that one, as well as just needing to keep your finger on the pulse as a job requirement?
Yeah, it's really such a fun part of my job. I love it. Like putting together the newsletter every week. I'm able to talk to like people I would never talk to, like I spoke to the Nanaimo's new poet laureate, like Neil Sircan, up at VIU a couple weeks ago, and just had a great conversation. We talked about all types of things related to like poetry and literature, but also like moving to the Nanaimo and kind of like, while this pandemic was kind of like at its high point, and kind of like how that made it kind of difficult to get to know like the city and get to know people in the city, and like kind of like trying to find our places in it, and just kind of having that like kind of like similar experience. And the other thing is just putting the listings together every week kind of really makes me realize and appreciate like just kind of what a vibrant kind of like arts and culture scene Nanaimo has. Like, we have like multiple like small independent venues that are doing shows all the time. There's a good all ages scene here, which I think is like a really special thing for a city to have. So like young people can go out and like have a safe space to listen to music, and there's not like alcohol being served, and are able to kind of engage in that. And like I think one band that really kind of stands out for me for that scene, and like there's so many bands, so I don't want to reduce this band, is a band called Danger Box, who kind of like formed like a few years ago, like in high school, and have really just become like a staple and like big supporters of the ology scene, which is mostly based out of like the Globe Live studio, just over here downtown. And I think like just like kind of raising awareness that like there's so much going on in the city, like from things at the Port Theater and the Nanaimo Arts Gallery to like the Vault Cafe and the Queens, and stuff up at VIU happens on a regular basis at the Malaspina Theater. The theater companies are always doing stuff. There's a new film screening society, which is amazing, that's been doing international and Canadian films every month at the Vancouver Island Conference Center, where City Council usually meets, actually, in the auditorium. I went to the first screening of that, and it was packed. And yeah, I just think that there's such a vibrant arts and culture scene here that I think like really is kind of underappreciated. And it's really nice to be able to put together like all the listings and kind of show like, maybe not every single thing, but like kind of show like the breadth and the depth of what's available in the city.
And your work goes beyond just the arts and culture in Nanaimo. You also have provided, for example, we had the provincial election campaign here in BC, and you provided at the Discourse extensive coverage of the different candidates' answers on issues relevant to people here in Nanaimo. What stood out from your coverage of the provincial election campaign this year? Yeah,
well, there's a couple of things. One thing is kind of getting back to our general approach as being like kind of a reader-driven kind of news organization. Is we actually did a survey of our readership before we produced anything for the election, and we asked our readers like, what are the questions that you would like to ask provincial candidates on these different issues, and we asked people to kind of rank their issues, which was the most important to them. And then we kind of did that. We kind of we took their most important issues, and we took questions that were submitted on these surveys, and we asked them to candidates. And I think that did help provide like a unique kind of lens into the candidates. And some candidates were maybe a little more responsive than others, but we did actually get all the candidates to respond to the questions, which was a lot of work, but I think was like really beneficial to be able to show kind of what the different positions are for these elections, be it healthcare, the environment, social issues and homelessness and housing. They were all kind of given an opportunity to kind of like address like what their thoughts were. The other thing I thought was really important this election, I think like the main takeaway for people in the Nanaimo is that the Fair Care Coalition was really able to use this election and really able to use the fact that the new riding in like North Nanaimo Lanceville was kind of more like in play. It was more contested. Like they thought like the Conservatives had a decent chance in that riding to really kind of push for promises around a new hospital tower and a new cardiac catheterization lab, which were made. So like both the NDP, who is the government now, and the provincial Conservatives, who are the official opposition, both promised to build the new cardiac cath lab and a patient tower for the hospital, which hasn't been done. Like the tower was built in like the 1960s. It's like, it's woefully inadequate. Like we need this healthcare infrastructure. Like local leadership is like united on like, has been like advocating for this for a long time. But it was really kind of like having like a political situation where, the parties felt that they, like it was a close election and, this one riding in particular, like could swing the election one way or the other in terms of who formed government. And, people in this community really made like healthcare in the hospital like a major issue that forced these parties to act. And I think that's the main thing that people should take away is like, is like, it's actually a good thing if the ridings are not safe seats for any party. And it's like being able to kind of like push for that and kind of pose like a political like threat, I guess, to like either the parties be like, if you don't do this, then, you may not get elected.
Speaking of the hospital, one of the most recent times I ran into you was a story that happened a little bit earlier this year that we both covered for our respective outlets, a pop-up OPS. I'm wondering if you could tell me what you took away from your coverage of that story.
Yeah, that was it was a difficult story. That was a story that's like a really serious issue. And for listeners who may not be familiar with it, the Doctors for Safer Drug Policy set up a pop-up overdose prevention site. Originally, they wanted to set it up on the hospital grounds, kind of in an area that we came out later, was actually originally, picked for an outdoor overdose prevention site in the last spring. And they weren't allowed. Security was like, no, you can absolutely not do this on hospital property. You have to leave. And so what they did is they went across the street, and kind of just set up on this like little strip of grass between the sidewalk and like an apartment complex. And they were really just there to kind of like raise awareness that like people in the hospital in the Nanaimo and like hospitals all across BC, except for St. Paul's in Vancouver, if you use drugs and you want to access healthcare at the hospital, like you cannot use drugs at the hospital, that aren't prescribed, obviously. And you have to leave and you're not able to really kind of get proper care. And, you are often, using off hospital property or, in an unsupervised kind of like location. And like, there's like inherent risks like to that. And, what actually happened was really sad. Like what actually happened was, a person who was in the ER for, I don't know exactly for what, but to access healthcare of some sort, in the day kind of went to the overdose prevention site, which was set up by Doctors for Safer Supply, and was able to kind of like use that space and kind of like, like make sure that he was safe when he used drugs. He didn't have to like leave the like hospital permanently. He did have to leave the hospital because they wouldn't let him set it up on the hospital grounds, but and then they were able to help him kind of get back to the emergency room to kind of continue healthcare when they closed down, because they didn't run at 24 hours. The Doctors for Safe Supply kind of just ran like a daytime service, and it kind of closed down around, I think it was around like 6 o'clock or so.
Safer Drug Policy.
Pardon?
Doctors for Safer Drug Policy.
Yes, thank you. What happened is, after the unsanctioned or the pop-up OPS kind of shut down for the day, like later that night, kind of early in the morning, he used drugs again in a washroom in the Nanaimo Hospital's emergency room. and he died. He had an overdose and died. And like I think it was like very traumatic. He was really well known within like the healthcare community. Definitely people at the OPS knew him quite well. People in the ER in the hospital knew him. Like people in the community knew him. It just kind of underlined the need for these services at the hospital. But as of right now, like we have had no like new commitments that there will be any overdose prevention sites at the hospital in Nanaimo or any other hospital in BC.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and generous listeners like you. Support and grow our nonprofit newsroom project today at chly.ca/donate with a monthly or one-time donation. With your support, we can expand Midcoast Morning from 2 to 3 original programs per week to cover local news, current affairs, and arts and culture.
Today on the program, we're taking stock of 2024 with Mick Sweetman. He's a local reporter who works with online news publication The Discourse. Mick is also an alumni of the CHLY newsroom. I wanted as well to touch on our local government here in Nanaimo. I know one story that you have followed recently for The Discourse has been the alternative approval process for the public works yard. As we wind up another year, the story was in the headlines kind of at the end of last year as well. What do you think people in Nanaimo need to know about where this is at?
Oh my God, yeah, I know this is something I covered back when I worked at CHLY. Actually, I think the first one I reported on, and I guess the alternative approval process. This is something that's been in BC for like a long time. I guess for listeners who may not be familiar with it, it's a process where like local governments, when they're going to take out a large loan for infrastructure of some type, they go to the electorate and they say, hey, this is the project that we're doing. If you're opposed to this project, if you're opposed to us taking out this loan, then please, submit a form like saying as much. And like if they have 10% of the electors in I guess the municipality or the regional district sometimes oppose it and like send in a form, then the government is not allowed to kind of proceed with that. And like BC is kind of unique among provinces in having this process. Like other local governments in other provinces don't need to do this. They can just go directly to the province and be like, hey, we want a loan. We're applying for like a loan. And like there's no kind of like electoral like input on like if this loan is something that the community wants or not. So yeah, basically, I won't recap everything. We don't have time. but yeah, like basically the city ran it improperly twice, and it failed on like legal because they didn't meet the legislative requirements. So they had to abandon both of those projects. City kind of went back to took another look at it. They kind of scaled the overall project back and kind of went forward with like a new proposal, and that one was defeated. Like that one, they ran properly at least, but the people who were opposed to it, the City of Nanaimo Oversight Group, they were able to successfully mobilize and organize people to sign these forms and submit them to City Hall, and they had enough. They had like over 10% of the of residents here oppose this project, so that was dead in the water. I don't know, like the whole AAP is like, it's a weird kind of like process that like is not really well known. And I feel like people are just kind of becoming more aware that this is a regular part of government. And it's kind of become like a bit of a bugbear for some people in the community who really don't think it's democratic. They think that this process is kind of like something that happens. It's mostly it's not really super reported on. It's not something that is well known as like how to participate in it, and they would like to see a lot of these projects go to referendum, where people have like a campaign and everybody votes yes or no on these projects. And I think that's a legitimate argument. Like I think that is definitely like if you want to have more kind of grassroots democratic control over like public spending, like that is definitely one way to go. The counter argument is that it's a lot more expensive to do that. So that's the trade-off with that. I do think one thing I will say on this is like I think that local governments kind of take a lot of flack for this process and using it, but it's really not like they didn't come up with this. This is provincial legislation that they have to follow if they want to take with this loan. They do have the option of doing a referendum. However, that is something that generally is used for things that are like seen as kind of like, what our mayor would call like nice to haves, like projects, not projects that are like really kind of a necessity for running a city. And like I said, they are quite more expensive. I think the estimate to do a referendum in the Nanaimo is about $300,000. But yeah, but really this is a provincial issue. This is like provincial legislation. If people really want to see this process like changed or eliminated or, modified in some way, like they really need to kind of be like advocating to the provincial government to change the legislation. Whether that will happen, I have no idea. But yeah, I think city councils are kind of like, and local governments are kind of like, they're kind of getting the blame for this process, and when they really have no control over it. Like they're not able to change what the process actually is. All they can do is try to follow like the legislation that exists.
So when you're reporting on a story like that for the Discourse or like the pop-up OPS outside of the hospital, we opened up this conversation. You were talking about like doing things differently than the daily news cycle. How do you report on some of these perhaps more controversial issues differently?
Yeah, I think like the main thing is like you can generally just take more time in your reporting. Like you can talk to more people. I think going back to the overdose prevention site, I think like that was the real thing that kind of like made my story like a little bit different than the other stories. Is like I was able to spend more time on the site. I kind of went back like later in the week and spoke to people again after the person that died. I had no idea. I just kind of stopped by one morning to check in and be like, hey, how's everything going? And that's when they told me that this person had died, and I was able to talk to people like on site about that and kind of bring that aspect of the story in, which other outlets did report on as well, but I feel like it was just like a slightly less like reactive like type of reporting, and like less about getting it out quickly and more about kind of making sure that like we had like a lot of different voices in the story. So like I spoke to the doctor, Jess Wilder, who was really lovely to talk to and kind of like make her points. I also spoke to other addictions medicine doctors from like Duncan and Comox Valley. I ended up actually not using their interviews like in my story because I had other voices. I had voices like the Indigenous elder who like lost two of her family members who were like young teenage girls to the overdose crisis, and the people from Mom Stop the Harm who like lost her son to an overdose, and I had a peer like support worker who was a student of VIU who was active in the Harm Reduction Alliance there, who was like volunteering, and like those are the type of voices that like I was able to kind of like bring into the story and kind of just add like a more of a diversity of voices, I guess, and like kind of a little bit beyond like here's the official spokesperson, here's like somebody from the press release, here's like somebody from like Island Health, I would say that to kind of set that story apart for me. Oh, and the other thing I really want to mention is like as a follow up to that, we actually got an email, like a letter to the editor from a person with kind of like experience like using drugs who like does a lot of like advocacy in the community around like people who use drugs, and she wrote quite a like a passionate letter that we published on the website. So we really made sure that we like had an opportunity to kind of highlight the voices of people who use drugs in our reporting as well. Even though it was like kind of a response on the letter to the editor about kind of like making the argument that like as a society we were all kind of responsible for the death of this gentleman who overdosed in the washroom.
As we head into 2025, how would you assess maybe the media landscape in Nanaimo? What would you say to someone who's looking to maybe put their finger more on the pulse of what's going on in the city?
Yeah, I guess like the main thing I would say is sign up for our newsletter. Obviously, like you want to make sure that you're listening to a diversity of reporting. I think that reporting and journalism in the Nanaimo here, like the people who work in journalism, I think are really dedicated, passionate, knowledgeable people. And I really think that, they're doing, like, we're all doing like the best that we can kind of with like limited resources. So, subscribe to like all the email newsletters, like subscribe to the Discourse, subscribe to like CHLYs, subscribe to like, Check News's, and subscribe to like the Nanaimo News Bulletin, and like really try to like get, the diversity of the reporting and kind of be able to kind of like, get like that breadth of what's happening in the city is the best approach, I think. And I think that's one thing that like we value here is I think we're the only outlet that like in our own newsletter will kind of like do like wrap ups of news that other outlets have covered, and kind of like try to make sure like the most important stuff is in our newsletter for our readers, even if they don't necessarily read all the other outlets. If they've done good reporting, we'll mention that and we'll link back to that work, because like it's not really for us about making sure like that our website gets like the most clicks on it. Like obviously we want readership on our website and our stories, that is important to us, but we want to make sure that our community is informed with what's happening like in our city. And I guess the other thing, just to get back to it, is like, especially for like independent news outlets like the Discourse, like CHLY, we really do rely on support from our readers and listeners, and just make sure that you, if you can, sign up to become a monthly donor. Go to the support us page on the discourse.ca, and just give like a small monthly donation to make sure that we can keep doing this work.
Mick Sweetman is the Nanaimo reporter for The Discourse, a local independent publication that covers news around the mid-Vancouver Island region. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom and more. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.